For decades, Sally Field made the world smile. From Forrest Gump to Steel Magnolias, her warmth and spirit defined Hollywood's golden heart. But behind that radiant smile was a pain she never spoke about. Now, at 78, Sally is finally revealing the truth she's carried in silence for years. A story of heartbreak, resilience, and the hidden cost of fame. What she shares will change how you see her forever and leave you absolutely speechless. Sally Field's story didn't start under the bright lights of Hollywood, but in the quiet corners of a childhood filled with pain she couldn't name. Born in 1946 in Pasadena, she grew up in a home that looked normal from the outside but felt heavy with silence. Her mother, actress Margaret Field, was beautiful and often gone, chasing her own dreams on film sets. Her father, a war veteran, was stern and distant, and when her parents divorced, the fragile sense of safety she had completely disappeared. When her mother remarried actor Jock Mahoney, things got even worse. To the world, he was charming and heroic, the kind of man people admired. But behind closed doors, he was someone very different. Sally would later reveal that he abused her, breaking her trust in a way that would shape the rest of her life. What made it worse was her mother's silence. She didn't protect her, didn't ask questions, and didn't see the pain hiding right in front of her. That kind of betrayal doesn't fade easily. It teaches you that speaking up can be dangerous, that love can hurt, and that sometimes the safest thing to do is to disappear. Sally became quiet, the kind of child who blends into the background, who learns to smile even when she's hurting. She once described herself as a child screaming inside, but no one could hear. That invisible scream would stay with her for years, but it also became her strength. Acting at first wasn't about fame or dreams. It was about escape. When she stepped into a role, she could be someone else, someone brave, strong, or happy. It gave her a voice when she didn't have one in real life. What she didn't know back then was that those early wounds would later become her greatest gift as an actress. They gave her depth, truth, and emotion that no one could fake. Every tear, every quiet moment on screen came from a real place. Sally's pain didn't destroy her. It taught her empathy. It made her real. And while the world would one day see a smiling star, that smile carried the weight of everything she had survived in silence. When Sally Field first appeared on television in the 1960s, the world fell in love with her. She was young, bright, and full of energy, the perfect picture of America's sweetheart. Her first big role came with Gidget, a bubbly TV series about a teenage surfer girl full of dreams and sunshine. At just 18, Sally became a household name almost overnight. Everyone adored her. The cute smile, the innocence, the lightness she brought to every scene. But what no one saw was how much she hated the box that came with it. The image people loved wasn't really her. It was a mask, a version of herself created by others. Hollywood saw Sally as the girl next door, harmless and charming. That image made her famous, but it also trapped her. Producers, directors, and executives treated her like a decoration, not an artist. They didn't care about her thoughts or her emotional depth. They just wanted the cheerful version of Sally that sold well. When she tried to ask for more serious roles, they laughed it off. She was told to smile more, speak less, and stay cute. For a young woman already used to being silenced at home, this felt painfully familiar. She was stuck in another kind of cage, this time a golden one. Her next show, The Flying Nun, made her even more famous, but it also made things worse. Wearing a habit with wings and pretending to fly on camera might have looked fun, but for Sally, it was humiliating. She was constantly underestimated, surrounded by men who told her she was lucky to be there and should just do what she was told. She once said she felt like a fool in a costume, trapped in a career that didn't reflect who she really was. But deep down, Sally knew she had more to give. She wanted to be taken seriously, to play characters that had layers, emotion, and pain, characters that meant something. So she made a bold choice. At a time when her career was booming, Sally walked away. She stopped taking the same empty roles, even though it meant disappearing from the spotlight. For nearly 3 years, she wasn't on television. People in Hollywood thought she had thrown away her career, but she was doing something far braver. She was rebuilding it from the ground up. Sally enrolled in the Actors Studio in Los Angeles, where she studied under the legendary Lee Strasberg. The training was intense and emotional. She learned to dig into her own experiences, her pain, her fears, and use them in her work. It wasn't glamorous, and there were times she questioned everything, but she knew she was finally growing into the artist she was meant to be. When she returned to the screen in 1976 with the TV movie Sybil, the world finally saw the real Sally Field. The role was dark, emotional, and deeply complex, a woman living with dissociative identity disorder caused by childhood trauma. For Sally, it wasn't just a role, it was personal. She poured all her hidden pain into that performance. Every tear, every scream came from something real inside her. The result was breathtaking. Critics were stunned. Audiences couldn't believe this was the same girl from The Flying Nun. She won an Emmy for her performance, but more importantly, she won respect. People finally saw her as a serious actress. Even then, the battle wasn't over. Hollywood is slow to change its mind, especially when it comes to women. Sally still had to prove herself again and again, but she didn't back down. In 1979, she took on the role that would define her career, Norma Ray, the story of a factory worker who stands up for her rights. The character was tough, emotional, and imperfect, and Sally brought her to life with raw power. Her performance earned her an Academy Award, but more than that, it silenced every person who had ever doubted her. She wasn't a sitcom star anymore. She was a force of nature. When Sally stood on that Oscar stage, it wasn't just a win for her. It was a victory for every woman who had been underestimated. But even after that success, she never stopped fighting for her place. She went on to star in Places in the Heart and won her second Oscar, proving that her talent was no accident. Yet fame didn't change her. She stayed grounded, aware that the same system that once tried to silence her could do it again. Sally Field's journey to break free from Hollywood's sweetheart trap wasn't just about acting. It was about reclaiming her identity. She had spent her childhood silenced, her early career underestimated, and her emotions misunderstood. But through her determination, she showed the world that true strength doesn't always come with noise or rebellion. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the decision to walk away and start again. By the time the 1980s ended, Sally Field was no longer just an actress. She was a symbol of resilience. She had proven that women didn't have to stay in the roles others gave them. She could be strong, emotional, angry, loving, and imperfect, all at once. Her story became a blueprint for every actress who came after her, a reminder that the most powerful thing a woman can do in Hollywood or anywhere is to refuse to be what the world expects and to become exactly who she is. Love was never simple for Sally Field. It wasn't a fairy tale filled with roses and easy endings. It was messy, painful, and full of lessons that would shape the woman she became. Sally loved deeply, but she also lost deeply. Every relationship she had taught her something about love. But more importantly, it taught her about herself. And in the end, after years of heartbreak, she realized that the greatest love story of her life would be the one she built with herself. Her first experience with love came when she was young and searching for safety. After growing up in a home full of confusion and emotional pain, Sally wanted stability more than anything. At just 22, she married her high school sweetheart, Stephen Craig. He was kind and familiar, and for a while, it felt like the quiet life she needed. They had 2 sons, Peter and Eli, and Sally tried to build a home that was warm and steady, the kind she never had as a child. But even in that peace, something was missing. She loved her family, but deep down, she felt unseen. Her marriage began to feel like another role she was playing, a part she didn't fully fit. When it ended in 1975, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just 2 people quietly drifting apart. Still, it was painful. Sally had to face the truth that love alone wasn't enough if she couldn't be fully herself in it. Then came Burt Reynolds, and with him, everything changed. If her marriage had been soft and steady, Burt was fire. They met on the set of Smokey and the Bandit, and their chemistry was undeniable. To the public, they looked like the perfect Hollywood couple, handsome, glamorous, and wildly in love. But behind the smiles and flashing cameras, things were complicated. Burt was charming, but also controlling and insecure. He wanted Sally to fit into his world, to be the version of herself that made him comfortable. He criticized her choices, doubted her talent, and dismissed her ambitions. When she won her first Oscar for Norma Ray, he didn't even show up. She stood on that stage, clutching her award, smiling through the heartbreak of knowing that the person she loved couldn't be happy for her. Still, she stayed with him for years, hoping that love would somehow fix what was broken. Like so many women do, she tried to make it work, believing that if she loved him hard enough, he would change. But love like that comes with a cost, and for Sally, the cost was herself. The longer she stayed, the smaller she felt. Eventually, she realized that she couldn't keep losing pieces of who she was just to make someone else comfortable. Walking away from Burt Reynolds was one of the hardest things she ever did, but it was also one of the bravest. Years later, Burt admitted she was the love of his life, but by then, Sally had already moved on. She didn't need his love anymore to know her worth. Her third chapter in love came with film producer Alan Greisman. This time, it was calm, quiet, and full of respect. They had a son, Sam, and for a while, it seemed like she had found her peace. Their home wasn't dramatic. It was steady, safe, something she had always wanted. But as the years went by, the spark faded. The connection that once felt strong grew distant, and Sally once again faced the same truth. Comfort isn't the same as happiness. She loved Alan deeply, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that she was losing herself again. So, she made the difficult choice to leave. There was no anger, no bitterness, just the realization that loving herself meant knowing when to walk away. After that, something shifted inside her. She stopped chasing relationships that demanded she shrink. She stopped trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect partner, or the perfect woman. Instead, she started focusing on the kind of love that didn't ask her to change, the love she had for her children, her work, and herself. Sally poured her heart into her family, especially her youngest son, Sam. When he came out as gay, Sally didn't just accept him, she celebrated him. She became one of Hollywood's loudest and most heartfelt advocates for LGBTQ+ rights, standing proudly beside her son and speaking about love in its purest form, unconditional and fearless. Her love for her children became her greatest source of strength. They grounded her, kept her humble, and reminded her what really mattered. In her later years, Sally began to understand that real love isn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It's about peace. It's about honesty. It's about being with people who let you be yourself without fear. Now, when she looks back on her life, she doesn't see failure in those past relationships. She sees lessons. Each heartbreak taught her something about boundaries, self-worth, and the courage to stand alone. She once said that learning to choose herself was the hardest and most freeing thing she ever did. And it shows. Sally Field no longer defines love by who stands beside her, but by how she feels inside. She found peace not in a partner, but in her own reflection. She built a life surrounded by the family she raised with care, by the causes she believes in, and by the work that still brings her joy. She learned that love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go, healing, and finding yourself again. In the end, Sally's love story isn't tragic, it's triumphant. It's about a woman who spent years searching for love in others, only to realize the most powerful kind was the one she gave herself. And that kind of love, honest, patient, and unconditional, is the kind that never fades. Sally Field's legacy isn't the kind that screams for attention. It doesn't sparkle with fame or live for the headlines. It's quiet, steady, and deeply human, a reflection of a woman who found her greatest strength not in shouting louder than others, but in standing firm in who she was. Her story isn't just about success in Hollywood. It's about survival, truth, and learning that the most powerful kind of strength often comes from stillness. From the beginning, Sally's life was shaped by pain and resilience. She grew up in a home that looked ordinary from the outside, but was filled with silence, confusion, and emotional neglect. Her childhood taught her early how to hold things in, how to stay small, how to survive. That kind of upbringing could have broken her, but instead, it gave her a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't fade when life gets hard. She carried that same energy into her career, never loud, never desperate, but always real. You could feel it in her performances, the honesty, the vulnerability, the strength hidden behind soft eyes. Sally didn't need to act tough. She was tough. When she began her acting career, Hollywood wanted her to be something else. Cute, cheerful, uncomplicated. They saw her as the smiling girl next door, the kind of actress who fit neatly into their mold. But Sally was never content with being a product of other people's expectations. She fought to be seen as more than the pretty, harmless face they wanted her to be. That fight wasn't easy. For years, she battled to break free from the sweet image that the flying nun and Gidget had cemented. People loved that version of her, but it wasn't her truth. And Sally's life, even then, was always about truth. When she walked away from the easy fame those roles brought her, she wasn't running. She was reclaiming her power. She studied acting seriously, diving deep into the craft that had once been her escape as a young girl. In the quiet of the studio, she found herself again. She learned how to take her pain, her anger, her fear, and turn it into art. And when she returned to Hollywood with Sybil and later Norma Ray, she came back as a woman reborn, not a performer chasing applause, but an artist demanding respect. Her performances in those films changed everything. They were raw, emotional, and real. You could see her heart in every line, feel her life behind every tear. When she stood on stage accepting her first Oscar for Norma Ray, it wasn't just an award. It was a moment of validation for every year she'd been told she wasn't enough. She wasn't just winning for herself. She was winning for every woman who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or silenced. But Sally's legacy isn't defined only by her talent. It's also about her grace. In a business that feeds on ego, she remained humble. While others chased fame and perfection, she chased meaning. She didn't hide her flaws, her pain, or her age. She spoke honestly about her struggles with self-doubt, about motherhood, about love, and heartbreak. She opened up about the abuse she experienced as a child, not to shock people, but to heal and to help others do the same. That kind of openness takes enormous courage. She showed that sharing your truth doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Even as she grew older, Sally never tried to cling to youth the way many stars do. She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. She embraced her wrinkles, her years, her wisdom. She aged naturally and gracefully, becoming a role model for authenticity in an industry that often punishes women for getting older. She reminded people that beauty isn't in perfection, it's in honesty. She didn't chase the spotlight. The spotlight came to her because she was real in a world that often isn't. In her later years, Sally began focusing on what truly mattered to her. She spent more time with her children and grandchildren, nurturing her family with the same love she poured into her work. When her youngest son, Sam, came out as gay, Sally became one of his fiercest supporters. She didn't just love him privately, she stood beside him publicly, using her voice to advocate for LGBTQ+ rights. She spoke with tenderness and conviction, saying that a parent's love should never come with conditions. It was another example of her quiet strength. She didn't shout or demand attention, she simply stood in truth, and that truth moved people. Over time, Sally began to withdraw from the fast pace of Hollywood. She didn't need it anymore. Her worth was no longer tied to awards or scripts. She found peace in the ordinary, gardening, walking by the ocean, writing, reflecting. She lived life slowly, intentionally. The same woman who once had to fight to be heard now found comfort in silence. She often said that stillness was her strength, that after decades of chasing roles and recognition, she had finally learned to just be. That's the kind of wisdom that only comes from a life fully lived, from pain fully felt. But make no mistake, her stillness doesn't mean she faded away. Sally's presence is felt deeply, even in her quiet. Younger actresses look to her as a symbol of courage. Fans still revisit her performances, finding comfort and inspiration in her characters. Every role she ever played carries a piece of her, the strength of a survivor, the vulnerability of a woman who's felt deeply, and the calm of someone who's made peace with her past. Sally Field's legacy is not loud, but it's lasting. It lives in the characters she gave life to, the truth she spoke, and the people she inspired simply by being herself. It's a legacy of compassion, resilience, and authenticity, of a woman who refused to let the world define her and instead defined herself. She taught us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to get up again, to keep going, to love yourself enough to choose peace over chaos. Now, in her late 70s, Sally is living proof that you can survive life's storms and still find calm. She's not trying to be perfect. She never was. She's simply real, and that's what makes her unforgettable. Her life reminds us that strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in how softly you rise. Stillness isn't emptiness, it's power, and Sally Field has mastered both. When people talk about her years from now, They'll remember more than just her awards or her famous roles. They'll remember her honesty. They'll remember the warmth in her voice, the truth in her performances, and the calm wisdom in her eyes. Sally Field's story is a lesson for all of us, that even in a noisy, chaotic world, you can live with grace, stand with strength, and leave behind a legacy built not on noise, but on heart.